The name Epstein Island has become synonymous with secluded luxury and unspeakable secrets. But what if I told you that long before our modern scandals, private islands have always carried a darker, more sinister allure? For centuries, these remote outposts have functioned as extreme laboratories where states experimented with control, exile, and exploitation, and where nature itself evolved lethal, forbidden worlds. From political prisons to snake-infested death traps, each island in this list unveils a horrifying micro-history that mirrors universal truths about power, paranoia, and the fragility of human order. Welcome to 10 islands whose secrets were never meant to leave their shores. At number 1, we begin with Poveglia Island, Italy. Hidden within the Venetian lagoon lies one of the most sinister islands in history, Poveglia Island, a place forever stained by plague, death, and madness. During the 18th century, Venice used this remote location as a quarantine station, or lazaretto, where victims of the bubonic plague and those suspected of carrying the disease were exiled to die. Entire boatloads of the infected were ferried across the lagoon, abandoned on the island with no hope of return. Over time, the grounds became a mass grave, absorbing the bodies of nearly 160,000 plague victims whose ashes, according to local accounts, make up much of the island's soil. Poveglia became more than just a geographical spot. It turned into a necropolis, a city of the dead, and a place Venetians feared so deeply that its very name became synonymous with despair. But the island's role did not end when the plague subsided. With its walls, isolation, and reputation as a dumping ground for society's unwanted, Poveglia was repurposed as a mental asylum in the early 20th century, infamous for its cruel experiments and primitive lobotomies. Within its decaying buildings, patients were subjected to inhumane medical procedures, carried out by doctors whose authority went unchecked in the island's shroud of secrecy. Whispers of tortured screams, ghostly shadows, and lingering presences gave rise to legends of hauntings, cementing Poveglia as one of the most haunted and forbidden places in Europe. Today, the island remains abandoned, off-limits to visitors, a reminder of how institutions of power repeatedly turned it into a holding pen for those deemed dangerous, first the contagious, then the mentally ill. Poveglia's history demonstrates how places of exclusion never lose their stigma. Instead, they are recycled to contain whatever society most fears. At number 2, we encounter North Brother Island, USA. Tucked away in New York City's East River, North Brother Island tells a chilling story about the boundaries of public health, personal freedom, and state authority. Originally established as a quarantine facility in the late 19th century, the island became infamous for housing one of the most controversial figures in American medical history, Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary. Mallon was an asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever who, despite never feeling ill herself, spread the disease through her work as a cook. When she refused to give up her livelihood, authorities forcibly confined her to North Brother Island, where she lived under virtual house arrest for nearly 3 decades until her death in 1938. She was not a criminal, yet her exile served as a powerful symbol of how easily civil liberties can be erased in the name of public safety. But Mallon was not the only one imprisoned there. North Brother Island also housed countless patients suffering from tuberculosis, scarlet fever, and smallpox, all cut off from society under the justification of disease control. The very geography of the island allowed the state to bypass normal legal protections, creating a space where medical authority operated unchecked. Once bustling with staff, hospital wards, and caretakers, the island eventually closed in the mid-20th century and was left to rot. Today, it stands abandoned, its buildings reclaimed by vines and birds, a ghostly time capsule of medical history. Yet its legacy is far from forgotten. North Brother Island represents the ethical gray zone of quarantine, raising questions about how far governments should go when balancing public health against personal freedom. The case of Typhoid Mary still resonates in modern debates about pandemics, forced isolation, and the boundaries of individual rights. Like Poveglia, North Brother Island embodies the disturbing reality that places of isolation do not just confine disease, they confine people. At number 3, we move to Robben Island, South Africa. While it is most famous for holding Nelson Mandela and other anti-apartheid leaders during the 20th century, its grim history began centuries earlier as a dumping ground for society's undesirables. In 1847, British colonial authorities established the Robben Island Insane Asylum, along with a general hospital designed for the chronically ill and those afflicted with leprosy. By the late 19th century, the Leprosy Repression Act of 1891 transformed the island into a segregated colony where sufferers of the disease were forcibly confined. In a disturbing twist, leprosy itself was falsely racialized as a black disease, leading to segregated compounds where black patients endured harsher conditions than their white counterparts. This medical apartheid was etched into the island's very geography, with boundary roads separating the staff quarters from the leper communities. When fears of contamination grew in the 1930s, leper compounds were demolished and burned, erasing the traces of those who had suffered there. But Robben Island's function as a site of exclusion was far from over. By 1959, the apartheid government repurposed its infrastructure to establish a maximum security prison for political prisoners, effectively recycling its legacy of medical segregation into one of political oppression. The prison's brutality was systemic. Black inmates were deliberately given smaller food rations than colored prisoners, while laborers were forced to build the very prison that would hold them. Mandela himself spent 18 of his 27 years of imprisonment here, alongside other Rivonia trialists, turning Robben Island into a global emblem of both suffering and resistance. What makes Robben Island's story chilling is how seamlessly the logic of exclusion shifted from isolating the sick to silencing the politically defiant. It is a stark reminder that once an island becomes a repository for the unwanted, its purpose may shift, but its core function as a tool of control remains unchanged. At number 4, we have St. Helena. Perched in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles from any mainland, St. Helena is best remembered as the final prison of Napoleon Bonaparte. After his defeat at Waterloo in 1815, Britain carefully selected this remote island as the stage for his ultimate political dismantling. St. Helena's jagged black cliffs, rising between 200 and 300 meters, created a natural fortress that made escape nearly unthinkable. But Napoleon's imprisonment was never simply about physical confinement. It was a deliberate effort to strip away his symbolic power, his imperial dignity, and his global influence. The British governor, Hudson Lowe, refused to recognize his former title, calling him only General Bonaparte, a calculated humiliation designed to remind him of his fall from grace. Even the environment was weaponized. Napoleon's permanent residence, Longwood House, sat on a plateau perpetually whipped by trade winds, cloaked in fog, and drenched in humidity, giving rise to an oppressive smell of mildew that seeped into everything. Admiral Cockburn and other officials enforced rigorous surveillance, reading all letters, monitoring all visitors, and ensuring Napoleon lived under constant bureaucratic control. This wasn't a prison, it was a psychological cage, engineered to reduce the former emperor into a mere mortal, watched at every turn. He spent 6 years in this limbo before dying in 1821, leaving behind one of history's most haunting examples of strategic exile. St. Helena demonstrates how island imprisonment can serve as a weapon of political neutralization, not merely through chains or walls, but through relentless erosion of dignity, identity, and hope. Today, the island is marketed as a tourist curiosity, but its most infamous chapter reveals how empires wielded remoteness itself as an instrument of domination. At number 5, we find Hashima Island, Japan, also known as Gunkanjima or Battleship Island, embodies the collision of industrial progress and human suffering. Acquired by the Mitsubishi Corporation in 1890, the 6-hectare island became a coal mining hub that fueled Japan's industrial boom. At its peak in the 1950s, more than 5,200 people were crammed onto just 16 acres, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Yet beneath the image of rapid modernization lay a system of brutal exploitation. During the 1930s and World War II, thousands of Korean conscripts and Chinese prisoners of war were forced into labor on the island, digging coal in sweltering tunnels with little food, relentless hours, and constant risk of death from accidents or exhaustion. Escape was impossible. The surrounding ocean acted as a natural moat, ensuring that Mitsubishi's private colony functioned as a lawless industrial prison. Survivors later recalled calling it Hell Island or Jail Island, a testament to the dehumanizing conditions endured there. By the 1970s, coal had lost its primacy to oil, and in 1974, Mitsubishi shut down operations, abandoning the island almost overnight. Today, the crumbling apartment blocks, rusting machinery, and hollow corridors stand as an eerie monument to both technological achievement and human suffering. In 2015, Hashima was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, celebrated for its role in Japan's modernization. But this recognition sparked international outrage, especially from South Korea, which demanded acknowledgement of the forced labor that had powered its prosperity. Japan eventually conceded that workers were brought against their will, but the controversy lingers. Hashima remains a powerful reminder that beneath every gleaming industrial success can lie a hidden history of exploitation, showing how isolation can be weaponized not just by states, but by corporations. At number 6, we land on Alcatraz Island, USA. Few islands have captured the public imagination like Alcatraz, the infamous prison set against the glittering skyline of San Francisco. But before it became the maximum security penitentiary of legends, Alcatraz had already lived many lives. Originally fortified in the mid-19th century, it quickly evolved into one of America's strongest coastal defenses, and later into a military prison by 1868. Confederate prisoners of war, Native Americans resisting displacement, and soldiers accused of desertion or treason were among the early captives. By 1934, however, the island was transformed into the ultimate symbol of federal power. A super prison designed for America's most dangerous and escape-prone criminals. Here, the philosophy was absolute control. Prisoners were guaranteed only 4 basics: food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, while every other privilege, from working to family visits, had to be earned through compliance. This rigid system, combined with the island's isolation, created a regime meant to break the will of its inmates. The geography itself was part of the punishment. Surrounded by freezing waters and brutal tidal currents, escape seemed impossible, though some famously tried. Yet perhaps the cruelest element of Alcatraz was psychological. From their cells, prisoners could see the vibrant lights of San Francisco, and sometimes even hear music, laughter, and parties drifting across the bay, a constant reminder of a freedom forever out of reach. Among its infamous inmates were Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. At number 7, we arrive at Pitcairn Island. Far from any continental shore, Pitcairn Island carries the twisted legacy of the infamous mutiny on the Bounty. In 1790, 9 mutineers from HMS Bounty, accompanied by 19 kidnapped Pacific Islanders, mostly women and children, settled on this isolated volcanic rock in the South Pacific. From the beginning, the community was poisoned by asymmetry. Land and authority were divided solely among the European men, relegating the islander men to servitude. This imbalance sparked violent clashes, leading to murders, retaliations, and near-total collapse by 1793. Out of this chaos, a distorted micro-society emerged, shaped by extreme isolation, limited population, and a closed genetic pool that reinforced unhealthy hierarchies. For over 2 centuries, this remote island existed under its own opaque social code, largely unmonitored by external authorities. The result was an environment where systemic sexual abuse became intergenerational, woven into the hidden culture of the island. It wasn't until 1999 that outside scrutiny pierced the veil, uncovering widespread assaults that culminated in the infamous Pitcairn sexual abuse trials of 2004. The British government faced an unprecedented legal challenge. Could modern law reach an island so remote and so self-regulated? The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council ultimately confirmed that Pitcairn Islanders were indeed British subjects, binding them under the UK Sexual Offences Act of 1956. This ruling shattered any illusion of immunity granted by remoteness. The case revealed how isolation, rather than preventing corruption, can incubate it until the reckoning becomes explosive. With only around 35 permanent residents left today, Pitcairn Island stands as one of the smallest yet darkest societies in modern history. A failed experiment in self-governance, where the romantic legend of mutineers gave way to generations of hidden abuse and legal entropy. At number 8, we encounter Clipperton Island. In the heart of the Pacific Ocean lies Clipperton Island, a desolate coral atoll whose barren history reads like a cautionary tale about abandonment and survivalist tyranny. Claimed by Mexico in 1906 for its lucrative guano deposits, the island briefly hosted a small military colony of about 100 soldiers and their families. But when the Mexican Revolution erupted in 1910, supply lines from the mainland collapsed, cutting the colony off from the outside world. What followed was a slow-motion descent into lawlessness. Starvation, disease, and desperation eroded social bonds until after the death of Captain Ramon Alno at sea, authority collapsed entirely. Into this vacuum stepped Victoriano Alvarez, the island's lighthouse keeper, who crowned himself king of the remaining 15 women and children. His reign was defined by brutality and sexual enslavement, transforming Clipperton into a tiny dictatorship where survival hinged on submission. Alvarez's tyranny lasted nearly 2 years until July 1917, when the surviving women, driven to the brink, killed him with a hammer blow, ending his rule in an act of desperate justice. Soon after, the U.S. Navy ship rescued the 11 survivors, though official reports conveniently omitted the details of Alvarez's execution, sparing the women potential legal repercussions. This erasure reflects how the collapse of civilization in isolation challenges conventional morality. Survival often requires acts the outside world would otherwise condemn. Today, Clipperton remains uninhabited, a wasteland of seabirds and crumbling ruins. Its story is rarely told, yet it illustrates how quickly human order can unravel when state power vanishes. Cut off from law, society regresses to raw domination, and the smallest of islands can become a stage for the darkest. At number 9, we discover the Island of the Dolls, Mexico. Unlike the other islands shaped by politics or war, Isla de las Muñecas in Mexico embodies a deeply personal kind of darkness born from grief, obsession, and folklore. Nestled in the eerie canals of Xochimilco, this Chinampa, floating garden, became the strange sanctuary of Don Julian Santana Barrera, a reclusive caretaker who lived there in near total isolation. Haunted by the belief that he had failed to save a young girl who drowned nearby, Barrera dedicated the rest of his life to appeasing her spirit. His method was macabre, collecting broken, mutilated, and decapitated dolls, which he hung across trees, fences, and buildings until the island itself resembled a grotesque shrine. For decades, Barrera lived among these decaying effigies, convinced they warded off evil while honoring the child he could not save. In 2001, the story turned even darker when Barrera himself was found drowned in the very same canal where the girl had perished, blurring the line between psychological obsession and supernatural fate. Since his death, the island has transformed into a hotspot of dark tourism, with visitors bringing their own dolls to join the disturbing collection. Many claim the dolls whisper, move, or watch them with hollow eyes, amplifying the island's reputation as cursed. More than a tourist attraction, Isla de las Muñecas represents the physical manifestation of one man's trauma, preserved by isolation until it became a cultural phenomenon. It is not simply a haunted place, it is a reminder of how grief, when left unchecked in solitude, can construct a terrifying world of its own, one that continues to grow long after its creator is gone. At number 10, we conclude with Snake Island, Brazil. Unlike human-engineered sites of exile, Ilha da Queimada Grande, or Snake Island, enforces its own prohibition through biology alone. Home to the critically endangered golden lancehead viper, Bothrops insularis, this uninhabited island is considered one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Around 10,000 years ago, rising seas cut it off from the mainland, stranding a population of snakes. With no small mammals available, they evolved to hunt migratory birds, developing venom up to 5 times more potent than that of their mainland relatives. This venom acts almost instantly, preventing prey from flying away and leaving the snake to starve. For humans, a single bite causes catastrophic effects, hemorrhaging, kidney failure, necrosis, and rapid death. The result is an island where some estimates suggest 1 snake per square meter, making it virtually uninhabitable. Unlike Poveglia, Alcatraz, or Pitcairn, the prohibition here requires no guards, prisons, or laws. Nature itself has made it off limits. The Brazilian government strictly controls access, permitting only scientists and the Navy to land, primarily for research and lighthouse maintenance. To dart tourists and thrill seekers, Snake Island has become the ultimate symbol of forbidden land, a natural fortress guarded by evolution itself. It is a chilling reminder that isolation can shape not only human societies, but also species in ways that render entire landscapes hostile to human life. In the grand narrative of Forbidden Islands, Snake Island stands apart, not as a product of cruelty, but as the apex example of nature's own lethal architecture of exclusion. Isolation is never just about distance. It's an accelerant that twists human ambition, natural evolution, and political power to their most extreme outcomes. From state-controlled prisons to nature's own forbidden laboratories, these islands remind us that remoteness creates both mystery and moral collapse. Some of these places are now tourist attractions, others remain sealed off forever, but all carry scars of suffering, control, and survival. If you enjoyed this journey into history's most forbidden islands, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more dark explorations. Thanks for watching.